Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein. Here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila, and since it's Hanukkah, we're going to be speaking about gambling in Halacha. You know, it's kvitlach. If you see somebody playing kvitlach, or if you see somebody in Atlantic City, and then you see a wedding, and this guy's one of the addict Kedushin, do you run up and start screaming, excuse me, or maybe afterwards tell them it's addict Kedushin, do you do it again? Is gambling muttar? What type of gambling? What about, you're going to say, I don't gamble. I would never go to Atlantic City. I'm Mamishrei Shabayim. I never played kvitlach in my life. What about Chinese auctions? Or even a lottery ticket? Rabbi Vad Yosef, the great Rishon Litzi in Aser. But a Chinese auction, argument could be made that that's some type of gambling. We're going to be speaking about this and many other halachas. So we have Dayan Ari Marburger from Lakewood, New Jersey, the erudite, brilliant young Talmud Chacham. We have Rabbi Dr. Benzion Sorotzkin, an eminent psychologist, one of the great, Frumma psychologists. This was a long interview. Here are some of the most amazing things he said that will turn your idea of what Jewish parenting is supposed to be like. Here, listen to this clip.
I think he speaks about it also about this point in Matthew Salmon's book on With Hearts Full of Love. It's not that he says the same. I don't know if he uses the word nachas. I don't remember, but he says the same thing, that it's not the child's job to make his parents happy. It's the parent's job to raise a happy child, so he'll be in love with Hashem, and that's the purpose of the whole thing.
And now, if you're a parent and you want to know how you should be bringing up your children so that they don't have addictive issues, listen to this clip.
The point I want to make is like this, that there's different types of trauma. The worst trauma a person can have is when he doesn't feel his parents are happy with him.
So that's a fabulous interview. We will have Rabbi Moshe Taub, the Rav from Queens, speaking about gambling. And then we'll have a courageous gambling addict who will speak about the damage that gambling can do to your family. He will speak about divorce, suicide, drug use that he regularly encounters among Frumma people. Right? He's a Hamish Yungaman from Borough Park. Frumma people who are gambling addicts, things that will really surprise you. So I just want to tell all my holy, holy listeners and partners in this endeavor of Yeshiva Shalmaila, my Charusis, that we get a lot of calls, and most of them are really intelligent. Vaccination from men, from women, pro, anti, throwing people out of shul, etc. What do? I have a very hard day job, and I also have a hard night job. I learn. So rather than responding to each one, I try to respond to those I can, but we put them all online. So you can listen. You can go to any program. If you're on the internet, you can go to the website. If you're on the phone, you could do it and just listen to caller after caller after caller, many of whom disagree, which is wonderful. I always like to say, if two people are thinking alike, one of them isn't thinking. Before we go to our program, I want to say a short word on Hanukkah, and I want to ask you a question. It's not the riddle of the week, but I think it's a fabulous question. What do we say in the Al Hanisim? We say at the end of the Al Hanisim, Achabo, Banecha, etc., and what does it say? V'kavu shmoinas yemei Chanukah elu lahoides lahal Shimcha Gadol. They adliku neiros b'chasreis kachecha, and then afterwards they will kaveya the Yom Tif of Chanukah. On Purim, what do we say? Kilkaltas machshavtai hashevoisalei gmulei bereishay v'salu oisev es banav alaitz, and it stops. It doesn't say v'kavu yemei Purim elu lemishta lesimcha. Why by Chanukah does it say v'kavu, and by Purim it doesn't say v'kavu? And I want to suggest an answer. The answer that I want to suggest is that if you look in the Rambam, the Rambam says that the Nevi'im, Uv'bnei Kain tiknu HaNevi'im, the Rambam Paragimel, he says by Purim was Al Yedei Nevi'im. Megillas Esther, the Gemara asks, Ma Esther Seif Kala Hanisim, Ma Shachar Seif Kalayla Esther Seif Kala Nisim, so the Gemara asks, for Ika Chanukah. So the Gemara says, Nitali Kasei. Purim is Megillas Esther in Tanakh. If you take out the Tanakh, you're going to find, in the Chumash, you can find Megillas Esther. Chanukah is totally Mishnaic. It doesn't say any place. So that answers the question. By Chanukah, B'kavu, the Chazal were Koveya, the Chachamim and the Maysharim were Koveya, the Kavush minus Mechanaka. Purim, we weren't Koveya. The Rabbi Shalom was Koveya. The Nevi'im, Al Pi Hashem, were Koveya. So even though it has a din of Seifrim because it's not in the Torah, but Avada was Al Yidei Nevi'im, the Rambam writes. So it comes out from this something amazing. Hanukkah, of all the Mayadim, is the only Mayad that is man-made. We made Hanukkah. And what does that mean? By all the Yom Tovim, the Rabbi Shalom invites us to celebrate. Pesach, he made the Yom Tov. Heviani el Bais Hayayin, the Rabbi Shalom says, come to me. V'digla layahava. But on Hanukkah, we invite the Rabbi Shalom to rendezvous with us. We invite him to our homes. We do the inviting. And it's interesting. Anybody who's married, they know the joy. One of the great moments in life that I remember was when my father, Zachaim Levracha, he came to me for Shabbos. Imagine the son, the child inviting where the parent comes to them. We initiate it. That's so beautiful. That's the Yom Tov of Hanukkah, which is why the Rambam in Hilchos Chanukah says a beautiful lashon. He doesn't say it anywhere else. There are Tariag mitzvahs and countless drabanans. What does Rambam write about Chanukah? He doesn't write about any other mitzvah. Mitzvahs der Chanukah chaviva hi ad ma'od. When you invite your parents to your house, isn't that the most special thing? When we ask the Rabbi Shalom to rendezvous with us, a Yom Tif that's Bidei Adam, and that what separates Avram Avinu from all the tzaddikim that preceded him, Adam, Noach, Mesushalach, what does it say about Avram? About Avram it says, Es Haleikim is Halechnech. He went with God. Rabbi Shalom told him to do, he followed the words. He was a tzaddik. By Avram it says something else. His Halech Lefanai. Don't just follow me. Initiate something. Do something new. Do something on your own. What is Avram? When Avram makes milutz on the 8th day, what does that mean? 7 days, Rabbi Shalom made heaven and earth. The 8th day, he says, no, Avram, step up to the table. Now it's your time to make an imprintur in your body. Now you his halech lefanai. What does Yaakov Avinu say? Elokim asher es halchu avoisai lefanav. Avram v'Yitzchak, God who my parents went in front of him. They blazed the path. They didn't just follow. Hanukkah, we don't just follow. We actually step up to the plate. It's the 8th day. It's so we become a partner. What does the Yalkut Shemaidi say? In the beginning of Bereshis Ramesei, it says, Mitchilas briyasai shel Adam, in the beginning, Nis'aveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu shutef betachtainim. He didn't want just a copier, a follower. He wanted a partner, somebody who's going to initiate. We light a candle, we initiate. So this Yom Tif, which the Rambam calls Chaviva, is when we write the Rabbi Shalom, come to us. It's not Heviani, come down to us. We invite you. So on this Yom Tif, which celebrates the Koyach of Klal Yisrael, this Halech Lefanai, how do we do it? Remember, we are so puny. We are Klal Yisrael. How do we shtel devek by we are the Ma'atim, the Chaloshim. We're tiny. In this huge universe, how small is man? Tiny, right? So what do? What does Chazal Kaveya? We light a candle. And what do we light a candle? This is symbolic of the Avodah of Klal Yisrael. In the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year, the shortest day, the longest night is always on Hanukkah. That's when they will convey it. It's also, by the way, the smallest moon, the smallest sun, and the smallest moon. The 25th is when the moon is at its smallest. All the Yom Tovim and the Karet are on the 15th, with the exception of Rosh Hashanah, it's by Kesef. But all the Moyadim are when it's the moon. Sukkot, Pesach is when the moon is at its strongest. Here it's tiny sun, tiniest sun of the year, tiny moon. What does Klal Yisrael do? We go light a candle. And what's the message? It's true, we're tiny. But you know how much, when you light a candle in a room that's dark, do you know what you could accomplish? Do you know what a small candle can do? Do you know what a call to somebody who's in pain, visiting somebody in the hospital, hugging somebody who's tzibrochen, going for a shiva and hugging the person, touching the person. being there. You know what a small candle could do? You know, I saw the Aderis, the great Aderis, Rabbi Elio David Rabinovich Tumim. He writes, when I learned, he says, after he left yeshiva, he said he learned for many years in absolute poverty and hunger. And he says at one point, he says his stomach, he was the father-in-law of Rav Kook, who, by the way, his daughter, Rabbi Aderis' daughter, died of hunger. Rav Kook's first wife died of hunger. He says, I was so poor and I was so hungry. I said, I just can't do this anymore. He said, I went to take a walk in the street to figure out what to do. He said, and somebody saw me. It was an old chava from Volozhin. And he came over to me and he said, Elio, I remember, gedenk, what type of a masmid you were in yeshiva and how it inspired me. And Aderis says, and then the person just left, but he said that the divrei chizuk that he gave me changed the course of my life. That one time, that hug, when I was going out of my mind, I was totally broken, that candle that he lit, he said, changed my life forever. Aderis writes this in his autobiography. So what's the avodah of Klal Yisrael? The Klal Yisrael, which is chaloshim, ma'atim, what does it say? Light a candle. And it's not our job to illuminate the world. Kafsa we paskin ein zakikla. We don't know how it will accomplish it. It could be way beyond us. Klal Yisrael's message is, Rabbeinu Shalom, you empowered us, right? We're supposed to halach lefana. You gave us a mission. We are tiny. We are going to light a candle. And if we light a candle, who knows? That tiny little candle could burn 800% of what we put into it. So what's our job? What's our takeaway from Hanukkah? It's the Yom Tif that's man-made. With the Rabbeinu Shalom, we were empowered. We created this Yom Tif. And what is the Yom Tif? Light a candle. Do some good deed. And when we do that, we are spreading the light of Hanukkah till forever. Arachti ner l'mashichai. So here's the riddle for this week. It says in the Parsha, Vayipel al tzavarav. Right? So it says that Yosef fell on Yaakov. He hadn't seen him in 30-some-odd years. So famous Rashi, Yaakov loy nafal al tzavara Yosef. Why? He was koira es Shema. Famous Maral. He took this exalted moment to read Shema. So the Sifsei Chachamim says that Yosef did not read Shema because he was Isaac in the mitzvah of Kibbud Av, and Isaac, the mitzvah, is patur ben ha-mitzvah. Since he's being Mekayim, Kibbud Av, hugging and embracing his father, he was patur from Kriya Shema. Whereas his father, there's no mitzvah to be Mechabed the Ben. He was Chayiv. So the question is, in Yeridei in Reish Mem, Hilchos Kibbud Av, we paskin, according to the Sugi in Kiddushin, that no mitzvah is nidcha mipnei Kibbud Av. Your father said, bring me water. And at the same time, there's a mitzvah to daven mincha, or ma'ariv, or whatever the mitzvah sit in the sukkah. So meiniach kavod aviv aises ha-mitzvah. Why? Because both you and your father is chayavim bekavod ha-makayim. So a mitzvah that both you and him are both b'chuyivim, he say kol ze'achdis, and we both together have to do the higher cause. It's not nidcha because of my father. So v'zayit shver. Why didn't Yosef read Shema if there was an Inyan to read Shema at that time? Some spiritual musig, whatever it may be, to read Shema. How could Kibbud Av be doicha the chiyuv of Shema when we know that Kibbud Av is not doicha any mitzvah because atav avicha mechoyim bekavod hamakayim? That is the riddle for this week, and we will of course post the winning answers. And at the end of this show, we will announce the winners. We will play the winners of the last week's raffle. In fact, I think we may play more than one, maybe one or two this week. We got so many answers. So if you have an answer, call it in. Let's go to our wonderful guests. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Rabbi Ari Marburger. He's a Dayan in Benzion, Maysharim in Lakewood. He's a Talmud of Pesach of many years in Lakewood, over 20 years in Beis Medrash Gevaya. He's a Musmach from Beis Medrash Gevaya, and from Hagayin Reb Zalman Nechemya Goldberg. Welcome, Rabbi Marburger.
Shalom.
So, Rabbi Ari, here's my shaila. It's Hanukkah. Many people play kfitlach on Hanukkah. You know, they get together, they make latkes, and safkaniyot, etc. It's sort of almost a minig Yisrael, certainly in certain circles. Is it muttar or not? Give us a little bit of a primer. Is it asa? Is it muttar? Are you doing an aveira by gambling? Or even more than that, people go to Atlantic City, etc. Give us, what's the halachic, besides hashkafa, just a halachic point of view.
Okay, so the short answer is that a Psy.D who follows the rulings of the Mechaber and the Rambam has a very serious problem with almost all forms of gambling. We'll qualify that a little bit later. If you're an Ashkenazi, there is a bit more leeway. Many times it will not be at least gezel midivreim, but it is never recommended in halacha. Dreidel, Samaka will be perhaps a third discussion. But to understand exactly the parameters and where it does apply, we'll have to spend a few minutes going through some of the background of the concept of an asmachta, and that'll make, I think, the halacha l'maisa much more clear and accessible. So just to give you a basic overview, in general, when parties come to Bezdin, two people have an agreement, they have a contract. Bezdin doesn't really have the right to review it and decide whether it was a good deal or a bad deal. The parties signed the contract, the kinyanim were done correctly. We have to enforce it even though the deal was a poor deal, absent any level of fraud, duress, or oinah. One very big exception to this, where you'll have two parties that will enter into an agreement, but a Bezdin will ignore that agreement and just hold that it's unenforceable, is what's known as an asmachta. A speculative agreement, penalty clause is probably the most common example of that, and that is when a person agrees to something, that under a certain contingency, if something happens, he'll pay a certain penalty in a certain amount. That's called an asmachta, and very often it is simply not enforceable in halacha. There are many different sheets of how to define a asmachta, but to just, again, a basic simplification is there are more rules. There are three basic categories. And that is, the first category is when you agree to do something, right? You hire a contractor to complete a renovation. The contractor says this will be done in 6 weeks. You've been around the block a little bit, so you say, no problem. But if it's after 6 months, I want a penalty, that every day that goes by, every week that goes by, you're going to pay a penalty of a certain amount. Now, that is a classic asmachta. The contractor is agreeing to that penalty simply because he has this confidence, or perhaps overconfidence, that it'll never get to it. He'll never actually have to make those payments. So if something goes wrong, he doesn't complete it in time, he will very often be able to come to Bais and say this clause is not enforceable because it is an asmachta. Now, to define an asmachta, what penalties or what contingencies are acceptable, or hilchos tanai, and when it's an asmachta, we have three basic categories. The first is when something is completely under your control. If I commit, I'm going to go down the block to the store and buy something from you. I'm an accountant, and I commit. I will do your taxes by April 15th. And I agree that if I don't perform, I don't do what I promise, I'm going to pay you for the damages that I caused, perhaps even some of the lost profit opportunities. That typically is not an asmachta because I meant what I said. I have the complete control. I have the ability to perform. If I choose not to and instead pay the damages, pay the lost profits, that is typically enforceable. The other extreme is when I gamble or bet on something which is completely out of my control. We gamble about the weather. We gamble about a sports game. We gamble about something which I know I have no control over it. In this case, there are more rules that this is not an asmachta because I know good and well when I went into that bet, there's a 50-50 chance whether I'll win or lose. I can't control it. There's nothing that I can be overconfident about because I know it is not in my hands. I might like this sports team better than the other, but I can't control whether they'll prevail or whether they'll lose. And there are more rules that is not an asmachta. That's something that could be enforceable. The middle category is something which is somewhat under your control. There's some level of skill involved. You believe you'll be able to pull this off in time. It turns out it doesn't work out the way you expected or had hoped. Those agreements are typically not enforceable because of the idea of an asmach. Now, based on these three categories, we get to what's called mesachet b'kovya, which is essentially gambling, recreational gambling. Now, in that case, the Mishnah tells us that someone who engages in gambling is pasul edus. He is not fit to testify. For that matter, someone who is engaged in gambling or perhaps owns a casino, the same way he is pasul edus, would also be pasul to be a Dayan, to be a judge. or for that matter, he'd be possible to be the Dayan Teveir. He would not be qualified to hold public office. Now, there is machlokes why that's the case. The Rambam learns that Masachet Bekuvia is Gezel Midavrehem. Because it's a gamble, money that's earned is, at least Midrabanan, considered stolen, considered theft, and therefore the person who engages in such behavior is Pasal Edus. The Ramah, on the other hand, learns that
even though Rabbi, even though the Lashon Ram is Hayol ve'eni Isaac b'Yeshuvei Shalaylam, Arezu b'Cheska she'oichel min hakuvya. So the Rambam seems to sit on the fence. He says it's Eni Isaac b'Yeshuvei Shalaylam, and then he says it's Avak Gezel. So it's really I believe that the Rishonim already struggle with Pshat and the Rambam.
Correct. They struggle with it, and I think the consensus is the focus is more on the Avak Gezel, the fact that what you've done is gamble is considered theft in the Rabbanon. The reason why he needs the Eni Isaac b'Yeshuvei Shalaylam is if the person has other sources of income, then he may be doing this on the side. It's not l'te'avon. He's not directly benefiting from the gezel, and it may be wrong. He's not Pasal Edus. He's going to be directly benefiting from the gamble. It's l'te'avon, and that's required simply for the being Pasal Edus. But the
gezel itself would not Pasal in Leidus, the Rambam holds.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And that's why if it's a one-time thing, he has other sources of income, or for that matter, the Rambam differentiates between being an Akum and a Yisrael for this matter. But either way, according to the Rambam, the actual act of gambling, the money that was won, is Gezel Midavrehem.
Right.
So this is the sheet of the Rambam. On the other hand, other Rishonim and the Ramah agree. They maintain that the Asmachta itself is not Gezel Midavrehem. The psul is simply if that is the person's parnasa, that is he doesn't have a day job. He's Eno Isaac Yeshuvah Shalaylam. He's not involved in any constructive kind of profession. So for various reasons, he's not trusted. He's considered Pasal Edus. But the action itself, the monies that are won, are not considered stolen. Now,
so basically, Rabbi, let me just. So there's two opinions in the Gemara. What's the problem with Sachik Bekovi? Either it's also Eni Isaac b'Yeshuvei Shalaylam. This is like just a low-life, degenerate person. That's the problem. And the other opinion is, since Asmachta Lekanya, that it's Gezel. So it seems that there's a machlekes between the Rambam and other Rishonim and basically the Bais Yosef and the Ramah, whether the problem with gambling is you have no other job and you're a lowlife, or because it's Avak Gezel or some type of theft. So therefore, when you said before that for the Sephardim it's very problematic because according to the Rambam it's Gezel, so it would be asa to gamble, but according to the Ashkenazim it's just because Isaac Yeshuvei Shalaylam. So if a person does have a day job, he works, and at night he played a game of Kvetlach, or he went to a casino. According to the Ramah, that would be much less problematic. That sum up pretty much what you said?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And according to the Ramah, the reason why we're not concerned about an asmachta is because this Masachet Bekuvia is totally random. It is not in any way under control of the gambler. Therefore, it is not an asmachta, and we're not concerned with the problem of Gezel, Midivrayim.
Right. So let me ask you a few questions, Rabbi Marburger. You said that the Rambam and the Lashon HaTorah is as well, I believe, that with a guy, there's no problem of Avak Gezel. The Shulchan Aruch, I believe, brings this opinion, right? So then, even according to a Psy.D, who, according to the Sephardim, there's no tzad that it's a Shiloh Avak Gezel. We don't pass like the Ramah. But if they go, let's say, to Atlantic City, where these casinos are clearly not, they're not owned by Yidden, they're owned by big multinational corporations, but they certainly wouldn't say if there's a Yid, a stock owner, it's bottle, right? L'chaira, Sayikwa for the Sephardim, and Say according to the Ashkenazim would be muttar. You say that's correct?
That is correct. Now, again, if you're mentioning Atlantic City, I've obviously never been there, but my understanding is that Asmachta and Gezel may be the least of the problems. People there.
I agree. We totally agree from a hashkafa point of view. The Lashon of Ramoshes recently says it's mechur ma'oid. Forget about Atlantic City. See, even about bingo and anything. We're talking just from the problem of Gezel, from a halachic point of view, or for that matter, horse racing, or off-track OTB, off-track betting, horse gambling, football gambling. If these are big Gaisha corporations, according to according to the Rambam and the Torah, it would be muttar. Obviously, in Israel, it would be much more problematic. Is that fair to say?
Yes. I mean, the Rambam himself adds that even in case where there's no problem of gezel, he says that yesh by iser oisik b'dvarim b'telim shein roy la'adam she'asei kol yomav elo b'divrei chachma b'yeshuva shalaylam. So it's not simply a question of hashkafa or not nice. This is already the Rishonim saying that this is not something that a person should be engaged in.
Yeah, but arguably that Rambam's coming to say that even if you don't hold the gezel, you still have the other svar of the Gemara of Yeshuva Shalaylam. But the Gemara says that Yeshuva Shalaylam has to be if you do it exclusively. But if it's just an occasional thing where you not do that, everybody in the Gemara would agree. If you don't have another job, the Gemara says. So if that's the source of the Rambam, the argument would be that I am Isaac B'Yeshuva Shalaylam. I'm just going to whatever it is, whatever gambling method I choose on an occasional point of view, without the hashkafic issue, l'chayr would be muttar.
Perhaps, yeah? although in Orach Chaim, in Hilchos Shabbos, when it talks about the case of kuvio, where you're not going to gamble, but you're just raffling off who gets the bigger portion at the Shabbos table. So they already, the Magen Avraham and the Matzah Shekel learned that Ktas Isser B'Davar implies that even though we're talking about on a Shabbos meal who gets what portion, it does seem over there that it's a one-off.
That's a problem. It seems to be a steer in the Shulchan Aruch as to. I mean, you have to. Pasha said at Shulchan Aruch as it seems to be going gezel, which is how the Magen Avraham, I believe, Nemzon over there, that he says. Here we're saying there is a gezel. There we're saying it's not a gezel, which is a little bit of a steer. I don't have an answer to that.
Correct, but the Matzah Shekel and Magen Avraham do point this out, and they say even if you argue on the Rambam and holds it's not real gezel m'divrayim, das iser yesh b'davar is the lashon Matzah Shekel. The Mishnah Berurah, the Sharetzion says more, loy nochoinhu. They're saying it's not proper, it's not right. So exactly how to differentiate and what das iser means is open to debate, but they do say k'tas isser. We are talking about it. But the
Matzah Shekel also says yeshloimer demoided is be k'tas gezel. So with a guy, the argument would be is there is no k'tas gezel. Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. I mean, I'm not looking. I'm not a gambler. I'm just trying to before. And I think hashkafically you're 100% right that. Everything you said is that like you said, you could be over on Gimel Chamurais without Gezel. You could be over on, Agilei Arayis, whatever the case is. But just from a pure gambling perspective, well, for example, they have these on their computer they want to gamble. I mean, besides the damage it could do to his family, but l'chayr, if somebody has a job and he wants to, play fantasy football or something and gamble, so there he's not going to a place where there's any type of degenerates, etc. So we could say it could be damaging to his family and to his life, etc. But l'chayr would be hard to make an argument that it's avah gezel, where it's because of this Torah and Rambam about a guy.
Correct. Assuming the site is owned by a guy, which is hopefully the case. You also do. There is another point to consider, and the Rambam doesn't explicitly address this in the context of a guy. But when we're talking about Masachet Kuvia, and if we're relying on the Ramah that says, at least for an Ashkenazi, gambling is not Gezel Midivrehim, the case specifically is Kuvia, where it's a total question of luck, where it's completely out of your control. That being said, if you're gambling on something which there's a certain level of skill involved, where whatever the game that it is that you're engaged in, someone can be better at it, and it's not just a question of luck, then we've moved away from the concept of kuvia, and we're now dealing with a case of a real asmach. And according to the Ramah, in that case, we do not have the heter of kuvia. We may be back to a pure asmachta, which can maybe be gezel midaraisa. So we have to differentiate between the type of game. When we get to Hanukkah, dreidel happens to be perhaps the best type of gambling from a halachic perspective, because you spin the dreidel, that is pure kuvia. It's pure luck. I've never met someone who's a professional dreidel player. No one believes or is under the delusion that it's under their control and they can win the game because they know what they're doing. On the other hand, certain card games where there are people who are good at it or better than professionals, and a person can go into this gamble with this confidence that I know how to play cards better than the next person, that will not necessarily have the concept of kuvya, and this according to the Rambam may be a pure asmach.
Okay. So let's go back to playing kvitlach for money on Hanukkah. The way I'm understanding you, you're saying for a Sephardi would be very problematic, and for an Ashkenazi could be problematic depending on what level of confidence the guy and knowledge this fellow's coming to the game with, or he believes he is.
Correct. If it's something which he believes is under his control or is partially under his control, that is.
We know that 90% of kvitlach players think they're above average.
Yeah, so that would be a pure asmachta. A dreidel game for money is easier because that is.
Now, what about a Chinese auction? So, based upon this, would a Chinese auction then be for an Ashkenazi permissible because we understand it's a pure lottery, but for a Sephardi would be more problematic, I take it?
For Psy.D. it would be more problematic. On the other hand, a Chinese auction, the way it's structured, there is a potential heter. Basically like this. Even the Rambam, who is the one that's machmer on kuvya and says it's gezel midavrehem, the Rambam's shita is that by any asmachta, even a pure asmachta, that if I give the money in advance, if the other person is a muksik, he's holding on to the funds, there we do not have the problem of asmachta, because when I've already given over the money, my counterparty is in possession of it, I know I'm not getting it back if I lose that debt. And therefore there is a clear gemiras das. You mean it, there's a gemiras das, you know there's no going back on it, and the Rambam agrees that in that case the asmachta would be kanya. Now in the case of a Chinese auction, the people who buy tickets to the Chinese auction, they pay in advance, which means that the organization is now a muksik on that money, and if the person loses his bet, if you will, if he doesn't win the prize, because the Moisid is in possession of it, according to the Rambam, even the Rambam that's machmir on the idea of kuvya, concedes that once you're the muksik, we do not have the problem of asmachta. Now that's from the perspective of the Moisid, that they can keep the money that they were given because it was given in advance of the drawing and they were a muksik. If you win the prize, assuming you're a Sephardi, we should be back to the same problem, that how could I take the winnings that I got through gambling, that should be gezel midavreya. On the other hand, in this case, if we think about it, the moisid that has a Chinese auction is very different than a typical gamble. Because if I gamble on a game, so either if you and I have a gamble, one of us will win, one of us will lose. So if I'm hoping or expecting that I'll prevail and I don't, and I have to pay you against my will, that perhaps is gezel midavreya according to the Rambam. On the other hand, the moisid that makes the Chinese auction knows for sure these tickets to Eretz Yisrael are being given out. There's no question about that. The only question is who is going to be the lucky winner. But in that case, where the moisid knows 100% that whatever prizes they offer, they will be giving to the public, that's really not an asmachta, because there's no question. They're definitely giving it out. So from
their side, it's not an asmachta, but from the guy who's losing the money, you're saying there is not an asmachta because at that point he doesn't have it anymore, and it's muksik in the hands of the
Correct.
So let me just ask you a question. If people play kvitlach and they push the money to the center before the bet, honestly, it's been many, many years, I don't remember, assuming they have to put their money in before they bet, right, would the argument be made that at that point it's left your reshus already, and since it's left your reshus, it could be different than an asmachta where the money is still in your hand at the time you make this bet?
Yes, I mean the argument could be made, and the argument actually is made, at least with respect to kuvya, that the Ramah that is mako by gambling by kuvya, because at least in a case where there's no level of skill, it is complete luck, brings down various shitas that even though kuvya may not be gezel, on the other hand, there's no real kinyan, and it might be a ksas asmachta, again, different interpretations of the Ramah. So if you play your dreidel game, and the loser or the fellow spins a shin, and he decides to be a sore loser and says, I don't want to put in the money, you can't force him to do it, because even though it might not be gezel, if he does it voluntarily, you can't be koi for him.
So let me ask you a question, Rabbi Marburger. You're by your wedding. You're sitting there, and they're playing, they play. I don't know. By the beginning of the wedding, the song, the chassan marches down, and they say Baruch haba. And then you see.
David, I'm sorry for interrupting. I just want to go back for a moment to the Chinese auction, because we went through one analysis, but there's another, I think, very critical point with a Chinese auction, which is important to consider. And that is, let me just answer your question by throwing out two additional questions. When you buy a ticket to a Chinese auction, do you take it off your Meister or not?
You see, Rabbi Marburger, I would take the position that I know that you was from Moshe about it, that there are certainly many people who give the Chinese auction. They believe they're giving it to tzedakah, etc. And then you have people who don't. So it's very personal. I mean, most people, to give the money to a Chinese auction, they say, I'm giving to the Meister. And then there are people who really, they check the mail and they call in and they want to know if they won and they didn't win. I mean, do you know anybody like that?
Unfortunately, yes. But I think that question has a critical bearing on our discussion, because if a person takes it off his Meister, then he's relying on the Ibris Moshe that says the person is just giving money to tzedakah. This is just, making the donation anyway. He just gives it now. He has a little bit of a tevas on the side. He has, 1 in a 20,000 chance that he'll win, and therefore Moshe says that's not material. It doesn't have a real value, and you can take it off your Meister. Now, if that's the case, that the person who is essentially making a donation, and it could, so he happens to get a ticket, a 1 in 10,000 chance, which doesn't mean much to him.
It's not
arguably, even according to the Sfardim and the Mechaber, it's not an asmachta. I'm not gambling. I'm giving money to charity, and there's a small chance that I may actually win something. That being said, the people who you've just described, if a person takes this seriously, he's buying something. It has a value. In that case,
it's not gambling at all.
With respect to Meister, we have a serious issue then, because now I'm buying something of value. If I buy something of value from a Meister, just because buying it from a tzedakah doesn't mean that it's the valid use of Meister. I can't buy groceries from a tzedakah and take it off my Meister. So if I'm buying something that has value, it cannot be taken off Meister. And by the same token, if this is actually a gamble, if you will, I'm willing to give the Meister $100 because I want a chance to win this prize. We have to deal with the sugya of asmachta, and we'll have to deal with kuvya or not kuvya, etc.
So respectfully, the Tshuvas Van Huggis in Daled Shin Yud Aleph sort of goes along the line what you're saying, and then he says a cute word. He says, but if you're buying it because you think it's of value, he says, then you probably have somebody who you could sell it to also. He says, at this point, it's not gambling, but you actually bought something of value.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the tshuva, but I would just question why that isn't true. If you bet on a sports team, you probably could hedge that bet and find someone to sell that gamble to as well.
Valid. You're saying if you bought a ticket, it would be a similar thing then.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the tshuva, but at least the way I don't see the logic to it. The fact that you can resell it, why that would take away from the concept of an asmachta.
Well, he's saying you have something, so now you own something. It's not a gamble. Go sell it. Go buy it. It's a type of, I bought a stock. It could go up. It could go down.
Well, if I buy a stock, I own 1/billionth of Microsoft. And the same way, if I own the entire Microsoft, it's an asset that can go up, that can go down. It can produce dividends. I can buy it. I can sell it. So,
well, could you buy it? What would you say, Rabbi Marburger? Could you buy an option?
Okay, well, that's a valid question.
He's saying, in effect, you're buying an option, and you could sell this option.
Okay, but let's talk about options itself. What is the difference? Let's just use a bit of a thought experiment. If your favorite sports team is playing, and you think they're going to lose, what is the difference between going into a bar and betting against this team, or if this team happens to be owned by a public company, selling that stock short a week before the big game, or selling a put option? What is the difference between the two?
Well, I would say the answer, and I would say you're going to have a question on that. But my position would be is that when you buy an option, in effect, you have certain rights against the company. Whereas on the tzad that it goes up, I have from today some type of a position. Right? That's what an option is. Whereas you're saying that if you buy a ticket on a horse, you don't have a position on the horse, it's just a gamble.
Well, assuming it's just the option is just settled in cash, where I'm not buying the right.
But you never. It's true. It's settled in cash, but ultimately you would have the right to do it. But nobody wants the pork belly or the thing. They're buying it for that right. But ultimately you would have that right to. You would have a right to show up and say, "Give me my 10 pounds of sugar," but you settle it in cash.
Again, that depends on the option. Many of them are just financial instruments, and let's just deal with the pure option, which is a purely financial instrument. If the stock goes up, then I'll win. If the stock goes down, you'll win. We'll do a swap. We're only settling. The contract specifically settles for cash.
So would you suggest that a Psy.D can't hedge with options?
So I would say like this. According to the Ashkenazim, we don't have an issue because it is completely out of our control. And you may think you're a good trader, but since you don't control the movement of the stock market, that cannot be worse than kuvya, if you will, and it wouldn't be problematic. Now, as far as the Ein Oisik B'Yeshuv V'Shalom, I think we can all differentiate between someone who's gambling on a sports game, which is providing no value, as opposed to someone who's hedging his investments, which certainly...
Without a doubt. What about, how do you deal with Gezel then on options? I didn't follow.
Now, as far as Gezel, I think generally people have to put money down, and therefore
sometimes you can, and sometimes they'll let you buy on credit. If you consider credit worthy, if you consider credit...
Without posting collateral?
Yeah, that's fine. If you have a big balance sheet, they'll allow you to do that if you consider it a strong, or if it's a small amount and you have a decent account on E-Trade, they would, they assume that they'll come after you. But would that be also for a party?
They allow you without having stocks or value that's collateral for that hedge?
Sometimes, yes. Let's say you would say yes.
Okay, I'm not.
On the tzad that you would say yes. Let's assume for argument's sake yes. Would a Psy.D be usher to trade an option? It's a double, it's a big chumrah.
That could be, but do we have any distinction between?
I think the idea of an option is I have an ownership interest on the tzad that it moved up. Right, it's an ownership interest on it, but it's meant to take just like a stock is a paper ownership interest in a thing. Here, it's an ownership option that if it moves, I bought it at this price. If it moves down, I sold it at that price. But the concept of selling and buying means I actually sold or bought the stock, which is an instrument of ownership in the company. The option is to buy or sell the stock at a certain price. That is an ownership interest. Possible difference, but this is beyond my pay grade, and I respectfully submit to you, who is obviously much more proficient in.
Okay, this is not a Halacha, but I'll actually add to your Tmiya. Once we can broaden the conversation even more, all forms of insurance have a very similar question. If you insure a boat, that if it sinks, I will pay you X amount of dollars. Now, I have not become a partner in that boat in any way, and it's a clear, just a financial transaction. If the boat sinks, then we have a potential question of asmachta. Now, certainly, according to the Rama, this is a non-issue because no one controls the weather or whether there'll be pirates or not or whether the ship will survive. But if that's not the criteria, if the fact that it's in the other klal does not avoid the problems of asmachta, then we have a question. And in fact, the Rivash that discusses some form of insurance, brings this up. Now, it's a little bit better when there's a direct loss, and perhaps with options as well if you're hedging an actual transaction. Let me
respectfully pose a difference to insurance, okay? I think the concept of an asmachta is, look, if I don't bring you the sandwich lunchtime, I'm going to buy you a dinner in the best place in the world, or something like that, some guzma, right? So, big argument to be made, look, I didn't mean it, right? When somebody's in the insurance business, that means they're not insuring one house. If your house burns down, I'll pay you $1 million. That means they have thousands of these, and they're gauging the odds, and as a group of 1,000 units, I'm going to win. That's what insurance is all about. So when you just look at the spara, this is not an asmachta. This is a very calculated thing. Since I have a big body of opportunity, this one wins, the other one loses, et cetera, et cetera. So my chances are now increased in my hand because I have a large body. So nobody's going to take the position when you look at this person, is he some wild guy doing something impulsive in this? No, this is a very calculated, based on a great body of actuarial study, that this is this. And even if that one burns, I'm still going to make money because of all the others that I've insured.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're also underestimating the amount of actuarial science that goes into Atlantic City. The fact that a person is successful or sets up the arrangement in a way where it's unlikely for him to lose, that in itself I don't think takes away from asmachta. But I do agree. When you're insuring losses, it's not a guzma.
So, Rabbi Marburger, let me go back to a concluding question. You're at a wedding, sitting in the olam with everybody. Chassan comes down, they sing Baruch Haba, the Kala comes down, whatever, and you see an aid go up. And you know that last week was Hanukkah, and you know this guy had a kvitlich game in his house. There were thousands of dollars won and lost. So we get up, and we go over to the Masada Kedushin, and we say, listen, if this guy's Sephardi, be sure he's Pasoid. If he's an Ashkenazi, well, the Ramah says like this. It's a problematic Ramah. There's a stira between Hilchas Shabbos and Hilchas this. Rabbi Masada Kedushin, get another aid, or if the Kedushin happened, redo the Kedushin in the Yichud room.
It's still midrabanon without a Haggadah Eidus in Bezdin.
So if there was no Haggadah Eidus, the psul is not chal?
I don't believe so.
You're saying that end of the day, that anybody who is a Masachik Bekuvya, right, since it's a Drabanan, it would not be problematic as an aid so long as there's no Haggadah Eidus.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't recommend it, but I don't know that you have to stop the wedding.
Okay, it's always an honor to have such an erudite, learned Talmud Chacham like you, and you explain it in such a way that almost anybody, any listener, including me, understands so clearly what the issues are. We thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Brooklyn, New York, a psychologist, Dr. Benzion Sorotzkin. He's a clinical psychologist. He's a graduate of both Ner Yisrael. He learned in Telz. He's also an Anikel of the great Oznayim L'Torah. His father, Bill Tellstone. He has his doctorate from Yeshiva University in psychology. He was a psychologist in the Tzahal. He's a famous psychologist. Welcome, Dr. Sorotzkin.
Pleasure being here.
So talk to us about gambling. We have found, that halachically, if somebody wants to gamble, certainly in certain situations, it would be halachically permissible, right? It's like the Lashon of Rav Moshe. It's hard to answer it. It may be hard to master it, but it's hard to answer it as well.
Yes.
But we want to talk to you not from a halachic point of view, but more from a life's experience, psychology, hashkafa point of view, both the Telza Anikel and a psychologist. Talk to us about gambling. If I say to my wife one day, Razel, let's go to Atlantic City. Or I'm a bach. I want to say, what's wrong? People have to get, some of the stress out of their system. It's it's a danger. It's a tough life out there. Life is stressful. What's wrong? We'll have a good time. It's not. We have a chew for a Moshe. It's not us. What would you respond if as a psychologist?
Yeah. Okay, so if somebody was coming to me and wanted to do it that way, and he did it again, assuming that it's muttar. Halachically, and he's doing it responsibly. In other words, he's not spending too much money, not losing too much, not becoming obsessed with it, not becoming addicted to it. Then, obviously that's between him and his Rav, or between him and his conscience. So, if he wants to choose that way to spend his time, perhaps he can do something that will be fun, that will be wiser. That's the second. That's not really so much my realm. I really deal more with people who have already found it to be very distressing to their life. It's doing bad things to their lives, where it's more on the continuum toward addiction. So then usually they themselves.
Let me interrupt. Sure. So what are the odds? Sure. My name is Zalman Yankel, and I say I'm going to Atlantic City. It looks like a fun place. Now. Do you say, wow, it's like going to a baseball game. I'm not opining on baseball. Or do you say, wait, it's maybe a little bit more like trying cocaine for the first time. Try to give me as a layman, what are the dangers? Somebody heard their son. They have a wonderful 18-year-old son. His friends want to go, well, is he doing something dangerous, or is he just doing something harmless?
Excellent question. It's the same. It's similar to the question when they say that they shouldn't have kiddush clubs in shul because it leads to addiction, to alcoholism. Okay, it's just, now there's about 50 good reasons not to have kiddush clubs, but I don't know if becoming a danger of addiction is really the number one. I don't know if it makes that on the list. It's a mistake that people make, and this is not just people, because the government's approach is a war on drugs. It's the drugs that causes addictions. The opioid addictions, the problems with the opioids. There's like some researcher called it that people think there's like a chemical hook. Whether it's chemicals or the thrills of gambling, it's so enticing that you could easily get addicted to it, and that everybody's equal. The fallacy that people believe is that everybody's equally at risk. It's at random, or they use the term addictive personality. That for no particular reason, some people have and some people don't. So therefore, there's a good chance that there'll be a problem. But in truth, really there's a very strong emotional component to addictions that many people are not aware of. And many even professionals, unfortunately, are not so much into it, into seeing it that way. So let's say if a patient of mine tells me he's thinking of smoking marijuana, this happens frequently, or to go to Atlantic City, either of those two, with friends, just have a good time. So I will tell him that, that although many people do it without getting addicted, you are more likely to get addicted. Why? Because you grew up miserably unhappy. You're currently miserably unhappy. You have very little things in life that make you happy, and you're going to smoke pot or gamble, and you're going to have a thrill and get caught up in it, and have escape from your misery for a short period of time, and you'll become addicted to that escape. Not so much addicted to the chemical, but it's addicted to the escape. Okay, now I'll tell you a fascinating story that a researcher came up with I think it was in the 1970s. One of the big rayas that they bring that people that it's the substance that you get addicted to is way back in the 70s. Somebody did a study that they put a rat in a cage and they gave him 2 bottles of drink. One was water, and one was water laced with cocaine or opium. And most of the rats very quickly OD'd. They kept on drinking the one that was the drugged water, and they OD'd. So he said, "See, you're right. Once you give somebody the opportunity to take something that's so thrilling like drugs that gives him a high, he'll become addicted and he'll die." But then a brilliant researcher, a guy named Bruce Alexander, a professor of psychology in Vancouver, I think he was, he said rats are very sociable animals, and I guess if you see a rat in your house, you expect to have some of his friends around. But putting a rat in a cage in solitary confinement is very depressing. So it's not such a chiddush that he runs to get to, if he has a chance to escape from his depression by taking some drugs. So he created something he called a rat park, a wonderful enclosure with toys and other rats to play with. It was mamish gewaltig, something that a rat would really enjoy. And they did the same thing. The rats had a choice of drinking water or water laced with opium or cocaine. And none of the rats, I think they said it was almost zero. In the other case, it was almost 100% got addicted and OD'd. And here, almost none of them did, because they were miserable. So the sakana is be'ikr, somebody who has a desperate need for escape. So when he experiences that escape, even if it's temporary, then he'll want to take that escape. It's like somebody has a terrible itch, and he knows that scratching makes it worse. How many people can actually resist if it's really bad? Because they're desperate for temporary relief. Okay. Now, so that's one nekuda.
So yeah. Let me chazer over what you're saying. You're saying that gambling is like alcohol; it can be addictive.
Yeah.
But it depends. If a person is living like it's a free dinner life, he doesn't have stress, his marriage is good, his yeshiva life is good, his work is good, his learning is good.
Excuse me for interrupting. I wouldn't say he doesn't have any stress, because he wouldn't be dead if he has no stress. He doesn't have too much stress.
Doesn't have too much. So you say he's going to go there, and either he will or won't have a good time. But even if he does have a good time, it's okay. He has a lot of good times.
Yeah.
But if you're dealing with a person who's struggling at a difficult time in life, and suddenly this is euphoric, and here he's escaping from his tsaros. So that escape is going to become very powerful, and it's going to become at that point. So for this person, it's particularly dangerous. That's
Now, that's one side. That's something that's happening currently is misery currently, but there's a lot of research also. There was a few articles that were published in 2007 on this topic. That escaping it could also be from a history of trauma. It doesn't have to be even current. As one guy said, and Dr. Jeffrey Scherer, he said, the way he put it is that past childhood traumas was a strong, significant predictor of adult gambling addiction. Now, it could be because people who were abused or neglected or had a strong, significant childhood trauma could most likely are not too happy now either. So that could come together. But I'm saying that also plays an important role. I'll give you an example. Somebody I saw many years ago, I don't know if you're old enough to remember or know, or if you were in Eretz at the time, there was a gambling casino in Yericho once. It was open to Israelis.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
Okay, so it was for a certain tkufa. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we had peace, and we were able to go gamble in Yericho.
Right.
So anyways, so I worked with somebody, I was in Eretz at the time, and there was a guy that had a very, very significant gambling problem. He mamish lost, and he made lots of money, because he was a very wise businessman, and he lost even more than he made. And when I met him, he was like really down on himself. How he could be so stupid, he's ruining his family. I think he was considered a pretty chashuv person. He had a shtickle stella somewhere, and he used to go off and gamble. So he was very upset.
Dr. Sorotzkin,
yeah.
The need to escape human pain crosses all barriers.
Chashuv, of course. No. I only mentioned the chashiv not because of the chiddush that he had the problem. Is how embarrassed he was.
People want to escape their pain. It's like
No. I was just talking about why it was particularly embarrassing for him. That was only bringing that in. Okay, so anyways, he tells me that Mamshi doesn't understand, like, how can he do something so stupid and put himself at such risk? So I asked him about his history. It turned out that he had very chashuv parents who were very, very accomplished. He, I think, was the youngest, or I can't remember, maybe I don't remember exactly anymore. He had all brothers. He had, I think, 5 brothers. They were all very matzliach. And he probably had what today they'd call a learning disability. And he didn't do very well in school. And his father, who was indeed, I think, a chashuv person, but since he himself didn't understand what it means to struggle to do basic things, had very little patience for his son, and he mamish used to beat him.
Oh my!
He told me he used to get beaten with sticks sometimes. Okay, he never actually. Now that he was an adult, it was never spoken about openly. Anyways, his father I think he wanted to come with the grandfather. His father wanted to come to speak to me to understand like why the kid is doing such terrible things. Like he's lost all his money this way. He wanted to understand. I said okay. So I told my patient, I'll remind your father what he did to you when you was young, and maybe he'll understand why you're gambling. He starts going, oh, no, I can't hurt my father. Absolutely refused. Doesn't give me any permission to say it to his father. Okay, tied my hands. I can't say it. So the father comes to me and with the grandfather, and he says to me, "Could you just help me understand why? If I only understood, how could he do such a thing?" So I couldn't say so. I said, it's very hard to raise kids these days. It's difficult to be patient. I understand that your son had learning disabilities. It must have been particularly difficult. It must have been sometimes hard for you to handle. No, I was always patient and everything was gewaltig. He doesn't understand. So unfortunately, I couldn't answer his question. But you could be escaped, and this person not only suffered as a child, because of how he suffered as a child, he had problems now too. He was more impulsive than most people, and he had other issues, relationship issues and other things. So Mamela, there was an escape from that too. It could be current pain, it could be pain from the past.
So given, Dr. Sorotzkin, that I would say a fair amount of people have had trauma in their past,
yes,
right? And you say that could lend to gambling addictions.
Yeah.
I mean, Baruch Hashem, I grew up, it was mamish like the Brady Bunch. My mother, my father was incredible. It's like our family was like the Brady Bunch, as I imagine most of our listeners grew up in absolutely perfect childhoods. But for those who haven't, which I imagine it's probably more than a chayshish l'miyuta. I say this all tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But given that you say that anybody who's had trauma as a child or is currently undergoing some type of a trauma, I would, when you add those numbers, I would say it's probably a significant amount of people.
Sure.
What percentage of people that go to Atlantic City are at risk, would you say? Is it 10%? Is it 80%? Try to give us...
Okay. Before, I'll answer your question in a moment, but I'll just say, when they did that research on Rat Park, there's only on rats, but how about doing it on humans? But some researcher understood that actually there was a natural, you can't do that, putting humans in cage wouldn't work very well, but there was actually a natural event that happened that replicates the Rat Park thing. That when the soldiers came back from Vietnam, 20% were addicted to heroin. 20%. It was very 20% were addicted to heroin. In those days, they didn't know about post-traumatic stress disorders. They didn't have any drug treatments for soldiers that are returning, and they just went home. Okay? It turned out that 95% of them got cured by themselves, leaving that very, very traumatic place, and they went back to their regular life. They became unaddicted by themselves. 5% continue with their addiction. And they followed up on those 5%, and those 5% had much more of a traumatic history. So the point I want to make is like this, that there's different types of trauma. The worst trauma a person can have is when he doesn't feel his parents are happy with him. I think that's, trauma in school with friends is also could be very terrible for kids, but if parents are protective of their kids or try to help them in any way they could, they try to find a way to, and they're on their child's side, then it's not as traumatic. So what you're asking is true, since most people had some trauma.
Repeat that. Could you repeat that? The biggest trauma in a person's life is the sense that their parents are dissatisfied with them?
Yes. I'll tell you.
Could you prove that? I bring a raya to that. I mean,
okay.
When I learned in the mirror, everything they would say, you'd say Sfar, they would say Mehechatesa. I'm challenging you. I say Mehechatesa.
Yeah. Well, hold on just 1 second on that. Hold that thought for a minute.
Okay.
When I was working in Eretz Yisrael, I worked for an organization that took kids who lived in dysfunctional homes and placed them in residential settings. The residential settings, for the most part, were very, very good places, with very ibegegeben staff and this and that. Okay, it was wonderful. Almost all the house mothers were Holocaust survivors. So we were having a meeting, a staff meeting about one of my kids that I saw, who came from a very dysfunctional home. The father was an alcoholic. The mother was schizophrenic. It was very bad, and the kid was making a lot of trouble. So I was giving over some of the history of the kid, what he's gone through in his life, and what he's going through. That they should cut him a little slack. So I'm giving those kids the history, and then all of a sudden the house mother gets all upset, and she says, that's the trouble with you guys. You're always making excuses for them. Okay, so his father was an alcoholic, his mother's schizophrenic. You know what I went through? I was in Auschwitz for 4 years, etc., etc. Of course, I had enough seichel to shut up and just sit down and keep my mouth shut, And zeu, I didn't say anything more. We went on to a different topic. I was pretty friendly with this house mother, so I went over to her the next day and I said to her, listen, if there's a way to measure raw suffering, I'm sure that you suffered 1 million times more than he did. But I said, in one nekuda, and I said, just bear me out, don't get angry, just listen. In one nekuda, he suffered more than you did. Because who made you suffer? The enemies of the Jews. All the Jews that suffered, there was the enemy of the whole Jewish nation, and you together with all the rest of the Jews suffered. Who made him suffer? His own parents. So I gave her a mushal, and this convinced her. I said, imagine if somebody held you up in the street and stole from you $1,000. It would be terrible. It would be very painful. Let's say you found out that your best friend stole from you $50. Which one would hurt you more? Okay, so that's just a thought. And the raya, many people have written this. My article on the role of parents and kids going off the derech that I have on my website, I elaborate and bring the rayas to different svarim.
Chaim Brisket said a similar svar. I'll tell you, share with you. Chaim said, he said, why is it that he says you have a Rav and the butcher comes in and he shows the Rav a sircha on the reya, and the Rav says the animal is treif. And this butcher, they didn't, he listens to this, and his parnasa for half the year is gone.
Yeah, go on.
And he sheds a few tears, and he just says, listen, this is the Ratzon Hashem, and he walks out. He says if the same butcher walked in a Din Torah, when
Mm-hmm.
Mechel said this, and the Rav Paskin like Mechel, this butcher would start screaming and yelling. So Chaim said, what's the difference? He said it's one thing to accept it when it's, listen, this is what the Rabbi Shalom wants. It's another thing that's what you did to me, that's something else.
Yeah.
So he says the pain is very relative as to where it's coming from, Rav Chaim said.
Exactly. So this is so I bring many rayas there. I bring many quotes from Gedalim. It's even the same problem with friends. It's a dover pasha that if a kid hanging around bad friends or deviant friends, as they call it in the literature, is a bad thing, right? Obviously, try to hang around with good friends. But is everybody equally vulnerable to bad friends? Every yeshiva, every school, every class has some, relatively speaking. Are everybody equally vulnerable? Somebody actually studied this. They wrote did a whole study on this, and he came to the conclusion, which makes sense, that if a kid has a good relationship at home, he has a good relation with his parents, he has who to talk to. If something troubles him, he can discuss it with his parents. He's not that likely to get influenced by a bad friend as opposed to somebody who doesn't have that. It makes sense. He writes it very sharply in the Shurei Chumash of Volba writes that parents who blame the kids' misbehavior, bad behavior for bad friends are only giving excuses. That's what he writes in the Shurei Chumash. Now, again, doesn't mean that it's not something to worry about, but the best way to help a child be less connected to bad friends is if he's more connected to his parents. I think it's a pasha.
But let's go back, Dr. Let's go back to the aside you said before. You said the biggest trauma in a person's life are parents who are unhappy. Do you have a raya to that?
You mean from Chazal?
Not from Chazal, but
just from life.
Clinically.
From life.
Has it been clinically agreed to, etc.?
Yeah, I see it. I mean, clinically, I see it all the time. I once was working years ago with a young man who was in all kinds of trouble. At that time, I think he was about 17 when I first saw him. And over time, it became obvious that everybody in this family lives to please the parents. And the parents have their agenda, what they needed, that this child is going to do this for the family and for the family Maysharim or business. I don't want to get too specific. And this child will do, this is his tafkid. They're already planned out there. Each one will feel their tunas, what they're going to do for the family business. I'm using that term in a general sense. The geschäft. So I one time had an opportunity to meet the mother, and I realized this young man never developed a sense of self. He didn't have a self. He didn't live for himself. So I mentioned to the mother once that, the reason why your son has a lot of problems, I was meeting with him and his mother, and she was a mechanecha somewhere, and I said, because he everything he does is purely only to please you. So she looks at me and says, that's a problem? My mother is 85 years old, I still do. Everything I do is only to please her. So she didn't have that was a problem.
So is it a problem? Tell us, because I think a lot of parents would agree. Hey, is that a problem? Isn't that the job of a Jewish child to make their parents happy?
So let me tell you that for many years when I'd go to bar mitzvah and I'd be there sitting at a table with my friends, and they would give a bracha to the bar mitzvah bracha that he should bring nachas to his parents, I used to birch under my breath and say, is that really the kid's tachlis in the world? And they all thought I was crazy. One of them was at least intellectually honest enough. When he saw that I was mechavan to Chaim Brisker, he did me a favor and he sent me a copy of it. He was in Israel, he faxed it to me. It's brought down in Rabbi Frand, who actually I was in his shir in Ner Yisrael together. So in his book, he has a book called Listen to Your Messages. In there he brings out this ma'aseh that he heard from Rav Shapiro, that there was somebody who lived in Brisk. He was an amazing father, incredible. Oh no, wherever he lived, I don't remember. Whatever, he was an incredible father. He had an uncle that came to visit him, and he couldn't get over how ibergegeben his father was for his kids. So he asked his nephew, how could your children ever repay you? So he says that they repay you that you feel that you live on through your children. They give you a feeling of eternity, even though you'll be gone, but you'll live on through your children. That's how they repay you. So this younger man told the story over to the Briskerov, what his uncle asked him, what he answered. And the Briskerov told him that your answer is karv lapikorsis. Why? Because the Rebbeinu doesn't give you children to get anything from them. They're not nachas machines. I think Revolver, somebody once said. It was one of the Gedalim said that expression. He said, the Rebbeinu Shem gave you children to be mizdamet HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same way the Rebbeinu Shem gives you without getting anything back in return, you give without a cheshbon to get back. Now, of course, if you treat them right and everything goes well, you'll have nachas, but that's not their job. That's an incidental byproduct of doing it right. So when you feel your parents are disappointed, it's gefel. I'll tell you another chamais. I remember now that this was very more glaring related to what we're saying now. There was a fellow who, this was also in Eretz Yisrael, there was a person who also had a gambling problem. This person had made a tremendous amount of money, and he was obsessed with making incredible amounts of money. So I was trying to explain to me, and he'd get into fights with his wife about the money, how they spend the money. So I asked him, you have so much money, you can support your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but the revachim, if you didn't make another penny, what's the big, why are you so obsessed with this? So he told me why. Because his father had a small yeshiva, and because his father opened the yeshiva because his grandfather got killed in Europe, had a yeshiva, so he wanted to maintain the dynasty. So, and he wanted his son, eventually his son was very smart, he was hoping that he would then, when he's ready to retire, his son will take over. His son didn't want to do that. And he felt very clearly, and the father made it very clear that he's disappointed. So the son told me, maybe if I make millions of dollars, maybe then my father will be okay with me. So he was still obsessed with pleasing his father. I think he speaks about it also about this point in Maysharim Salmon's book on With Hearts Full of Love. It's not that he says the same. I don't know if he uses the word nachas. I don't remember, but he says the same thing, that it's not the child's job to make his parents happy. It's a parent's job to raise a happy child, so he'll be in Levid Hashem, and that's the purpose of the whole thing.
Say that again. That's very important. Say that again, and elaborate on it. It's not the job of a parent. It's not the job of a child to make the parents happy. It's the job of a parent to raise a healthy child. And if they raise a healthy child,
should be a healthy Ived Hashem and earn his Eilam Haba, and then the parents will fulfill this tafkid. Now, of course, as the parent does this, he'll also agav get nachas, because he'll see the kids doing what he's supposed to be doing. Not necessarily what the parent wants him to do. Some parents who are...
This goes against, Rabbi, this goes against the entire chinuch that I've had in yeshivas. The whole job of a child is kibbud aim, is to be mechabed, and to carry on the light till Mashiach comes. That when a person is born, they're being mamshich, the father's avodah, this and that. So walk me through this, because what you're saying is something that I think a lot of our listeners are standing back there saying, "Wow, this is impossible."
So I think I saw this quote from. I don't remember. I think from the Stipler, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me. But like this, let's say, when the schools or parents want to teach a kid midas, they usually start with kibbud aveim, kibbud hayrim v'mayrim. Incidentally, I don't know how do one chashon say that they have a negias in it, but that's usually one they start with. Okay. Now the thing is like this: should the father's interest in getting the child to do kibbud aveim properly be any different than getting him to say brachas properly?
Right.
It's not a perk. Many parents think that the cover that the child gives them is a perk. You work in this company, you get a car. So if you have children, you get a perk that you have Maysharim. It's absolutely. It's obviously that's not the Torah. It's a pikadon. You're supposed to take care of it. One of the things that one of the mitzvahs you have to teach your child, it's a very important mitzvah, and not just you have to teach him about Shmir Shabbos, making brachos. You have to teach him to have kavod for the parents, but it's not a perk that you have. You can't mun it and bezin as something that's owed to you. You can just say if somebody. I once saw this in a sefer once. I think the shiloh was like this: if somebody made a neder that the next person that asks him for $100, he'll give him $100. Somebody heard him, comes over and says, give me $100. He doesn't give him. Could he take him to Benzion and mun the $100?
Of course not. It's a ben adam l'makom. It's not a ben
adam l'chaver. You could take him to Benzion and snitch. You can take him to Benzion and snitch on him that he's not that he's not keeping his neder like any other mitzvah that he's over, and Benzion does whatever they do. But you're not a baldover here. You just happen to be the person it happened to. So you don't keep it avim because it's not a perk that's owed to you. That's one of the mitzvahs that a child has to do, a very important mitzvah, and he has to be mechunech how to do it. So obviously, if you yell and scream and criticize him all the time, then you're making it impossible for him to keep the mitzvah. So that wouldn't be a good idea. But if you're doing the proper way, then it's a tremendous thing that you're doing. You'll get tremendous schar for having keep it avim, and you'll get schar for helping him get to that place.
Wow. So again, you're saying that the biggest trauma that children carry in their lives is a feeling that their parents were unhappy with them.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, if you met two people, and one of them, you meet two kids, and they're both very unhappy, and one kid tells you he's unhappy because his Rebbe is right of him. Let's say it's true. Has happened such a thing. And the Rebbe is right of him, and the Rebbe is constantly upset at him. Another guy tells you that he's very upset because his parents are never happy with him. They're not happy. He's not learning enough. He doesn't daven enough. He's not doing this enough. Which one is going to be the more miserable in his life?
Yeah, but respectfully, Dr. Sorotzkin, I see. So, like, one is a dover over. His Rebbe this year is not his Rebbe next year. Whereas the unhappiness,
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly why I'm saying this, because your parents are your parents forever, and therefore then somebody's not happy with you, so you'll meet somebody else.
But then your point would be, so Dr. Sorotzkin, if that's the point, then it would be something else that's forever. Like somebody has he's overweight and he can't get would that be as traumatic? Is it a din in parents, or is it saying this is just a davar tzmidi, that's a davar atayna tzmidi?
Well, the parents have the ultimate tzmidi. That's it plays a role. I'll tell you like this. Let's say somebody's overweight. Let's say for a long time. It also depends how do the parents deal with the fact they're overweight. If they're encouraging, they don't shame him. They don't do something that makes him feel worse. I'll tell you about Maysharim. Happened many years ago. This is very eye-opening. A guy came to me. That he's having issues. He's newly married. He has issues. What's the issue? So eventually he spits it out that she doesn't look perfect. It's something very minor. He was masculine. Most people think that she's very, very good looking, but the mice, it's imperfect. It's not a perfect diamond, and it bothers him a lot. Now I was very interested because the guy was at least 50 pounds overweight. So I was trying to figure out, so I asked him about it. I forgot I came as.
So this guy's 50 pounds overweight.
Overweight, and he's not happy because his wife is not 100% perfect.
Is not 100% beautiful. You talk about somebody having issues, yeah.
Yeah, no, but he doesn't look like somebody who obviously has issues.
Yeah.
So what was the issue? So he told me it came out like this, and when I spoke to his wife. And to her, it didn't bother so much. She wished she lost weight. It's not healthy to be overweight, but she wasn't so. It wasn't such a big deal to her. So what's the shot like this? He told me that he was chubby as a child, and it bothered his mother a lot because everybody knows it's not good for a child, health-wise and otherwise, socially-wise. It's not such a good thing. So in order to try to get him not to be chubby, she was right with him. And she would say, as he got older and not losing any weight, probably made him gain more weight. She would say things to him. Nobody's ever going to want to marry you. Who's going to ever want to marry you like this? You got to lose weight. Okay, the Bais was Geholfen, the third girl he went out with, wanted to marry him. She looked past it. So, in fact, he told me when he got engaged, his mother told him, don't think that just because you got engaged, it's a right that I was wrong. I'm still right. She's a little bit blind. She first met you. Before the chasna, she'll break it off.
Wow.
Okay, now what happened, so if you think about the dynamics of this, this girl who grew up in a much healthier home, so she was able to overlook it. He's a wonderful guy. He was really a wonderful person, so and she was, okay, so it's not perfect. Nicht gefährlich. She didn't grow up that that's a necessity. And that grew up, it was done to him, that he demanded of him to be perfect. He now sees, that's the way he sees things. So he can't overcome her imperfection.
What happened? What was the end of the story?
I don't know because they didn't come back to me. They were visiting here from Eretz Yisrael. Somebody asked me to intervene, But they went back there to Israel, so I didn't have a chance to follow up. I suggested they see someone there. I don't know.
Dr. Could you share with us a few stories about the damage that gambling in your history that you've met has done to families or individuals?
The one from Yericho, the story from Yericho, that story, that's exactly what happened. He lost, he had loads of money, so he was able to allow himself to gamble a lot. He lost tons of money, and it started affecting his business because he was busy trying to get more money so he could pay off his debts and can maintain his business. So he lost his business. His wife, who was an incredibly wonderful person, was very understanding, but in the beginning, before he was ready to admit that he has a problem, because that's usually part of the problem. So she left him. She took the children and left him. His parents, who I mentioned, were always quite harsh with him. This, of course, inflamed it even more because, they were able to point out to him what a loser he is and what he did to himself. And, at one point he was suicidal because he was losing everything in his life.
Whatever happened to this person?
So eventually, his wife was really a tzaddikus, and she told him if he really if she sees that he's really serious, and he's really willing to take care of the problem, she's around. And I encouraged him to, besides therapy, to join a 12-step program because that's very often very helpful. Unfortunately, many of the 12-step programs they look at addiction as a disease and don't encourage a person to do the psychological work. But I find that doing them both together is the most potent way to deal with the problem. So he did. He eventually woke up and acknowledged that he has a serious problem. He went to 12-step programs religiously, and he went to therapy. And Baruch Hashem, it had a happy ending.
To the parents listening, you say that as a psychologist, the most damaging thing is when kids sense their parents are unhappy with them.
Yes.
So how? Give a few. A person has a son who's overweight or who doesn't do well, just isn't so smart, doesn't do well in yeshiva, doesn't try hard, isn't motivated. You have a son who's not motivated, a daughter who's not motivated. They're overweight. What is a parent? Give us a few guidelines saying,
I will.
After 30 years of being a professional, let me give you 3 rules, but only 3 rules. More than that is too much.
Before that, I just want to tell you this part of the rule. But the Chazanish, I saw a quote of Mechanech in Eretz Yisrael said he heard from the Chazanish. He said that whenever they have conferences about kids at risk, they always say you have to love your child and tell them that you love him. He said the Chazanish said that children need their parents' respect more than they need their love. I would maybe add the word acceptance, but the Mar Nevuchim says that love is not unique to humans. All mammals love their offspring. So being accepting of your child, even though he's imperfect and it's not exactly the way you wanted him, is much more difficult than loving your child.
So how do you come to that? Let's say a person has a child who they don't respect. The kid's not motivated, and the father or the mother were much better students. How do you do that?
Okay, so the first thing is the thing that throws many people off. This has actually been shown by some very significant research, that parents who are abusive, I'm using the word very, very liberally because I don't want to get hung up on the particular definition of their children, it's not because they didn't learn proper parenting techniques, it's because they see things more black than other parents do. So by them, the fact that the child's not learning so well, or that he's not getting always up on time for davening, or not learning when he's home or whatever, to them is a siman of awful things to come, that it's gefährlich, it's inexcusable. Or if a child is having troubles in school, and he doesn't study so well, they're not melamed schus. They're not done the schus that maybe studying is more difficult to him than other children. He has nobody to blame but himself. He's doing it to himself. Ki'ilu, there's a child in the world who would, if it was easily possible for him to be a regular kid who does decently in school and has friends and his parents are happy with him, would choose to do poorly in school and be a loser and get thrown out of school all the time, have his parents mad at him, as if somebody would actually choose that. So the proper way is the way to speak to your child, say, Yankee, listen, I have no doubt that you would love to do well in school, but you're not. So there's obviously something wrong. Let's try to figure out what the problem is. I can help you. maybe we can figure it out ourselves. Maybe if we can't figure it out ourselves, we'll find somebody who can help you. And then a child learns that problems are not something to be ashamed of. They're something to deal with, and that usually there's solutions. I think I saw once an amazing quote, I think from Rabbi Scheinberg. He said that the fact that most problems have solutions is a solution to most problems. So when a child has an open relation with his parents, and when he has a problem, they praise him for bringing it up and not shame him, and say, listen, we're going to lick this. We'll find somebody who can help us. Yeah. So I'll tell you just one more story. There was a young fellow who, a young kid, I think he was about 8 or something. I think he lived in Muncie. So I met his parents. I was at a chasna in Muncie, so I met his parents. His parents were telling me that although he's very athletic and very popular, he gets anxious. He's going to a sleepaway camp for the first time. He's very, very anxious, and it was mamish causing him breathing problems, and he's starting to panic about it, and it's going to escalate out of control. So I knew these parents from when I was in Eretz Yisrael, very nice people. I said to them, I don't treat children, but there's a child psychologist that I can refer you to in Muncie. He speak to him. He'll take care of it. Don't neglect it. So they told their son that they're going to speak to this guy who, he knows how to help children with this problem. So it happened to be they were making a chasna around bar mitzvah around that time, so they were busy, so they didn't have time, so they put it off for a few weeks. So after 2 weeks, he comes and says, "When am I speaking to that man already? I want to take care of the problem." Okay, Baruch Hashem, they went. He gave the kids some techniques how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with it. I think he only met him once or twice or 3 times maybe. And in Baruch Hashem, he went to camp. Everything was gewaltig. The next year, the father calls me and says, "You won't believe what happened. My son came over to me and he said, I want to go speak to that man again. I should have written it down. The same thing is happening again, but I don't remember what he told me. So let's go, and this time I'm going to write down what he told me." Understand? This child is growing up. That people have problems. It's normal. You don't have to be ashamed of it. We're all human, and we're all imperfect. If you have a problem, speak to your parents, and they'll either help you themselves or find somebody who can help you. That's what their job is. Okay.
Well, Dr. Sorotzkin, thank you very much for your wise advice and your time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Moshe Taub, who's the Rav of the Young Israel of Holliswood, Queens. He's also the director of BVK Kashrus, an AMI contributor. He's a Talmud and a Musmach of Bais Kavaya in Lakewood. Welcome, Rabbi Moshe.
Shalom Aleichem. It's nice to speak to you again, Rabbi Lichtenstein.
So here's the question. Hanukkah is a time when a lot of people play kvitlach. So my question to you is that halachically, is that problematic? Is it permitted, etc.?
There are so many ways to go with this shaila. I mean, the whole history behind kvitlach and dreidel and where does it come from, and Chassidish Paiskim, when they give great significance. I saw the other week, I've seen many varying significances to the dreidel. For the first time I saw what the Gimel Shin and the Nun and Hey stand for, that there are 2 major halachas to Chanukah, and that is that we say the complete Hallel, and that 8 nights of Chanukah we have lights. So the Nun stands for Neros, the Shin Shmeina, so Neros Shmeina, and the Hey and the Gimel is Hallel Gamor, that we say the entire Hallel. So especially when the Chassidish Paiskim, not only are they muttar it, but they give great significance to it. And I think it's bavust, a listener may know, the Chasam Sofer was very makbid to play dreidel the first night. He would make sure to join games. Certainly Chassidish Paiskim allow it. And it really is a question. There's a shaila in halacha. I mean, to explain the shaila before we give the heter, because puk chazi, mad amar dvar, the fact that Klal Yisrael acts in a certain manner is enough and sufficient evidence. There's a surreptitious wisdom to Klal Yisrael. So we know it's going to be muttar, according to the vast majority of Paiskim. But the shaila, Rabbi Lichtenstein, that you're speaking to is, I'm assuming, the shaila of gambling. You're putting money down. Let's assume some people play for nuts and candy, but if you're putting money down, even if it's a small amount of money, and there's a shaila of asmachta, and there's a shaila of yishuv olam, so it does seem, at first blush, at least for Sfardim, because as we know, Sfardim paskin like the Mechaber, And there's machlekes in the Mishnah and the Gemara about gambling, and Sfardim take the more stringent opinion that it's a real shaila of asmachta, it's a shaila of geneva, could be deraisa, could be derabanan. In fact, it's interesting, Rav Yosef paskins that the Sfardi is not allowed to even buy a lottery ticket. Now, there are Sfardish Paiskim who disagree, but in any event, it really brings to mind the question of dreidel and if it's muttar. So the Paiskim say, for a number of reasons, it's okay. I mean, the Klausenberger Rebbe writes that for small amounts of money, it's not really taken so seriously. And what I would say, at least for Sfardim, because again, Ashkenazim, we believe the problem with gambling, leaving hashkafa for a moment outside, we believe the problem with gambling is an issue of Yishuv Olam. That people, Chazal believed, need to be a part of the capitalistic society and building, creating things, and someone who's sitting all day playing blackjack is not a part of that, and is puzzled for Edis for that reason. But a Sfardi who believes that it's a real Geneva, meaning even if you do it once, it's a Shaila, what's suggested is if you do play with a dreidel, l'mashal, on Chanukah, everybody puts their money into the center of the table. Hopefully they're playing for small odds. And they say this is the money in order to play. We're each giving $5, and they relinquish their title. And
so does Sfardim not play dreidel? Does Sfardim not play dreidel?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't. It seems to me that most Sfardim don't even paskin like this tshuva from Rabbi Yosef. We've all seen.
Can we talk about that tshuva for a minute?
Sure.
It's really a startling tshuva. Rabbi Yosef says that a Sfardi cannot buy a lottery ticket because he says we paskin that it's asmachta lekanya. In other words, a person doesn't intend to lose money when he gambles. So it's a type of theft, and therefore, since asmachta lekanya, you can't play the lottery. Let me just point out what I think are some startling thoughts about this tshuva of Rabbi Yosef, who was certainly one of the greatest souls who ever lived. But, for example, certainly, let's say in America, when you buy a lottery ticket, you're buying it from some governmental authority. So the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch already paskins, the Torah brings that there's no shiloh by with a guy. That these are all types of avak gezel, etc. He said by a guy there's no din of avak gezel. So you're not taking it from Mendel or Zalman. You're taking it from the U.S. government, the state of Kansas, or whatever it may be. So I don't know b'chlal how it has any shaykhis. And the second thing is that the whole concept of asmachta means a person, when he says, I'll bet you $100 that the Yankees win. He never meant to really do it. He feels bad afterwards, etc. When somebody buys a lottery ticket, right? It's a governmental authority. There's dina de malchus dina. Are you going to really say the person did not think that he was going to lose this money? Something that's done by a card game is very different than that's done on the government auspices, etc. So and the Shulchan Aruch says there is no gzela by a guy. He brings from the Torah. I think it's a Reish Zayin. So it's a startling tshuva, and I saw Rav Sternbuch writes much about it, but I'm just pointing that out.
Even among Sfardim, I mean, you covered a lot of bases. We're not going to be able to touch all of it, but even among Sfardim, it's seen as a controversial tshuva. There's no question about it. Not to mention the fact that you are purchasing something. They always say the odds of winning a lottery ticket, you have a better chance of being struck by lightning twice. But the nafkamina with lightning and a lottery ticket is someone's going to win. And you're purchasing your chelek in that possibility, and you get a mamashus. You do get a ticket.
Which the Chuvas Van Huggis, right? You can resell to somebody else. If you buy a ticket for $1, you may get 90 cents for it or 75 cents, but it is something of value. Whatever.
It has a value. But I just want to point out that I have seen Sfardish yeshivas have Chinese auctions and have lotteries. So it seems befar Hesia, and I'm assuming they're aware of the tshuva, it seems that Sfardim do not paskin take this more extreme view. And we should also point out, I think, a fascinating point. You mentioned, betting on the Yankees, $100. I don't really follow sports. If that's an asmachta, maybe betting on the Mets might be more of an asmachta. But I once saw brought down from Rav Zevin, Zechar Levracha, who was one of the most interesting and original writers of the past 100 years. He discusses The Merchant of Venice from Shakespeare, where he says for a pound of flesh. And he wants to know, in Bais, would that have any purchase? Because that's an example of an asmachta. like you say something that's so extraordinary and that we assume it wasn't meant, he never meant for it to ever happen. Well, exactly like you said, which makes a lottery very difficult to claim it falls under that rubric.
So here I am. Let's say, well, I'm going to ask you this question two ways. Let's go back. My name is Mendel. I learn in Lakewood, and I want to know, I was invited to a Kvitlach game tonight. Can I go or not?
I remember, I'm going to answer you, but I want to go to take a different path. When I was learning in yeshiva, it was in Passaic at the time, and it was Bein Hazmanim, and someone got tickets to a Devils game. And he was a very frum, sincere boy, and he wanted to know if it was muttar to go to a Devils game. And he called up a Paisik, maybe I shouldn't say what the Paisik was, he called up a Paisik, and Paisik probably never heard of the Devils. Bacher calls him up and says, "Can I go see the Devils?" He didn't know what was happening. And he said, maybe you should ask your mashgiach. I think that's a very important psak, that there, in every shaila, in some shailas I should say, there's the halachic aspect, and then there's the hashkafic aspect. Halachically, the Paiskim not only support playing small games for small amounts of money on Hanukkah. There's an Inyan, some Paiskim say, it goes back to keeping kids awake, like by Pesach, that you want kids to stay up for the Hanukkah lights before there were electricity. They would go to sleep when it became dark. So to keep the kids up, to sing by the Hanukkah licht, you would play games. But today, I think there's a hashkafa element.
But respectfully, there's also many Paiskim who strongly disagree.
For sure.
Even Chassidish Paiskim, like Kedushas Levi, the Bnei Saskar, etc., they write really nasty things about. You have from just to
the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim speaks very harshly against it.
But I'm saying by Chassidim, you have the Bnei Saskar and Maimah Chodeshel, Maimah Bais. He writes very strongly against it. It's he says Chas v'Shalom. It's really the nastiest thing.
I would just say, from a personal experience as a Rav,
his lashon is V'gil HaKartin, the abomination of Kartin l'hafsid mammon v'lifrak el Torah mitzvahs. So you're talking about.
Well, first of all, Rabbi Lichtenstein, I would just say, the Averas that they had access to in those days, this was the worst they can do. For some people, Adarabba, if that's what they were doing, sitting and joining games on Hanukkah, I would be very pleased. That being said, so everything has to be seen in the context, but so you could say that today's context maybe should be more makel, but I would say the opposite.
So Rabbi Taub, break it down, the halachic part. Again, my name is Mendel. I learn in Lakewood or Chafetz or any yeshiva, and I was asked to, my friends are playing cards tonight. I'm playing Kartin. It's Hanukkah. The rest of the year I don't know. So I want to know, Rabbi Taub, you're a Rav, from a halacha and hashkafa view, break it down for me.
Well, first of all, the Paiskim to speak about, and I'm not going to discuss Chassidish Pais necessarily, but the Mishnah Berurah in the Taf Kufs, Taf Reishis, in fact, in the Ber Halacha discusses cards is not something that we should be playing with, and it's something that he should stay away from. And, halachically, I wouldn't even talk about the halacha. Not everything is about halacha. I deal with, I wouldn't say on a day-to-day basis, but on a month-to-month basis, people who have chronic addictions to gambling, and it has to start somewhere.
But Rabbi Taub, respectfully, there are people who have chronic addiction to alcohol, and yet we still drink alcohol on Shabbos. So the fact that something could be used in an addictive manner, is that a reason why not to use it?
Yes, I would respond as follows: that there are many shuls, using your mashal, that became dry. Over the past year, Baruch Hashem, it's metastasized, and many shuls have become dry in Ganzen. Even whether it's a Sheva Brachas, a Kiddush, a Bar Mitzvah, they're completely dry because it became a machla. And I think that especially when it comes to Hanukkah, you may Simcha, you may Teresh Baal Peh, maybe that's not the moment to have your introduction to cards. I think it could be very dangerous to Maysharim, Kodesh and Chol. And again, I think it's different in Europe. I think in Europe it was much more kosher. That was the one, it wasn't necessarily going to lead to anything. I'm very cynical when it comes to these things. Simply as a Rav, what I've seen, I think there's no purpose to it. Cards. We're talking about cards, not dreidel and not other games. But playing cards for money is I hate to use this term because it's been maligned, maybe rightfully so, but it's a gateway drug. Bachurim don't typically play with cards. Certainly don't play with cards for money. I don't know, if I'm going to say this, if even you'll air it, but I happen to know, as a matter of fact, that there are many places today and many from communities today that have card games throughout the year, not just on Hanukkah, from people. And it's not just a money issue. There are other things that go on at these card games that are not kosher by any standard and are illegal in certain states, in addition to that. And again, if someone asks me as a Rav, I will tell him, the Shlach HaKadosh writes that when a Rav answers a Shaila, he has to make a distinction between Halacha and Hashkafa. And I would tell him that halachically, there's a lot to be Saimach on. But hashkafically, I'm telling you, it's not worth it. It might be only a 20% chance that it will suck you in, but I've seen too much. And I think other Rabbanim also have seen too much. And it's not just on Hanukkah, Rabbi Lichtenstein.
Let me give you a quote from Moshe Feinstein. This is Igros Moshe Chelik Dalot Simalametei. He says, "L'sachik beklafim." He writes in parentheses, "Kartin," right? Ubingo, ukedaiba. Af she'ein al ze iser bar. Even though I can't say there's an iser bar, because clearly there's a, it's a halacha in the Gemara, if it's al tishuvei shalaylam or al hasmachta, and the Shulchan Aruch does seem to lean more to the area that it's yeshuvei shalaylam, and we have even though there's a steer in Shabbos and in Choshen Mishpat, the Ramah does say that asmachta, we hold that it's muttar, you're allowed to. That we Ashkenazim. He says, "Afal pi she'ein al ze iser bar, hem dvarim michuarim." Right? Who Moshe leitzim. So I think Moshe pretty much echoes your sentiment by saying that even if it's arguably mutter and there is no Issa Gomer, at least for Ashkenazim, he says it's a davar mechur. I mean, and to give you an example, how would you feel about a shidduch if somebody says, I have a shidduch for your daughter, where did you meet him? Oh, I met him playing cards. We could understand. It wouldn't necessarily. So let me ask you
not
something
a bracha.
But what about dreidel then? What do you feel about dreidel then?
Dreidel is a different zach. I mean, dreidel is that's something that you could taka say puchazi madamar dvar. I mean, on a case-by-case basis, it happens to be, as you and I both know, it's not a very commonly played game among adults. I to be honest, have never seen it being played among adults. My daughters via mol will play, and not usually for money. The Kleisenberger Rebbe writes, and I like this tshuva. He says that when you're playing for kleine geld and it's just for laughs, that seems to be okay. So again, to use your case,
and it's not a gateway. You're saying it's not a gateway type of.
It's not. If a bacher calls me up and said I'm playing dreidel, the only thing I would say, I said, "Oh, beautiful minig Yisrael terehi, but do me a favor, don't play for more than $5." There is. Listen, we know today, chachma bagayim tamin, and the chachma mangayim today is enormous when it comes to the sciences. That there are people who have this addictive gene, and we don't know what's going to spark it. So keep it to $5. It's kedai. I think Rabbanim also. You said, what would I do? I mean, Baruch Hashem, I have a little bit of experience in this, but I think for any Rabbanim listening, it's so important for Rabbanim to be aware that just because something crosses your desk, it doesn't make the desk owner necessarily proficient. There are shilas that come up that aren't halachic shilas, that deal with addiction, that deal with issues, lamashal, of gambling, and especially young rabbanim who aren't cynical, who haven't dealt with this before. Every Rav should have a psychiatrist and a psychologist on speed dial. You need a Rolodex of people who are chachamim and chayikrim in other fields that you can speak to. And that has to color your decisions in these inyanim. Avada, the halacha has to come first, but the hashkafa, as Ramesha writes, mechor hadavar, what is mechor? You have to have a relationship with gedalim in fields outside of Torah.
And to echo your thought, you say dreidel is not a gateway. Nobody's going from dreidel to heavy gambling. My father, Zechar Bracha, told me, he said that the Heilige Astraf Tzarav, it was known he fasted for 40 years. Right, Me'yechil Vastraf, he fasted for 40 years. Some say he had premonitions of the Holocaust coming. So this is during the early 1900s when the Enlightenment had spread its wings through Europe and people becoming more and more religious. So in Ostrov, in the city Ostrov, they actually went there. There's no zecher of his cave or anything. It was all destroyed. But he went out on Shabbos, and there were stores that were open Shabbos. So he went into a store, and he said to the person, "It's Shabbos Kodesh. How could you be open? You're being Mechal Shabbos." So the storekeeper was a clever fellow. He looked at the Ostrov and he said, "But Rebbe, you're also being Mechal Shabbos." So he said, "How? What do you mean?" He said, "You fast on Shabbos." He fasted, 365 days a year. So Rav Sefzerov smiled and he said, "You're right, I fast on Shabbos." He says, "But there's one difference. From my Chil Shabbos, nobody's gonna copy me. That's a stop learning." He said, "For your Chil Shabbos, I'm worrying that other people will follow you." I think that dreidel is going nowhere. That's your point. So let me ask you a question. Let's say somebody wants to bet on a horse race. Is it only hashkafa shaila, or is the halacha shaila here as well?
It will make an afkamina erstens if he's a Sephardi and Ashkenazi.
Okay.
But again, you're dealing with a Yishuv Eilam issue. I mean, if he's doing it once or twice, halachically leaving aside the hashkafa, there's nothing you could claim here. He's buying a ticket. A smachta, as Rashi writes, as the Rosh writes, is a very weak argument. And it's a Yishuv Eilam. It happens to be, as anybody who passes by, I forget what they're called, the off-site betting places. I don't remember what they're called.
OTB.
You see them all over.
OTB,
right.
Yeah.
Nebuch, you see these people there, and they're there from Yom V'Layla. I mean, it's like the Asara Batalonim Hayom. If the mission was being composed today,
yeah, but we do have to differentiate. You're differentiating between addictive behavior.
No. I'm asking you 100%.
Where it's just like a standard on a one-off type of
I'm
thing.
saying to you that be aware. I would tell the person, be aware that halachically be very concerned it doesn't turn into anything greater. But via Mol, from a halachic perspective, I can't claim something is asar. I can't invent halacha. But that being said, hashkafically, it's not as bad as a casino. Going into a casino, there's a lot that goes with it. I mean, everybody knows.
Let's talk about that. Is it asar to go into a casino? Or is it asar to gamble in a casino? Let's talk about gambling. Would it be asar to gamble in a casino?
Asar al pi halacha? I always give a mashal to my balabatim. And I once wrote an article in Ami, negate to some of these inyanim, and I gave the same mashal. You won't find the isser that the Meraglim were over, the great blunder of Klal Yisrael, which is why we're on the phone here in America. It goes all the way back to Meraglim. You won't find that isser in the Shulchan Aruch. Not everything's in the Shulchan Aruch. So the word aser, can I find a siman and a sif katan in the Mishnah Berurah? No. But sometimes the most dangerous things are what we don't find, like we used to say as Bachrim, the fifth Shulchan Aruch. So a casino, you want an Isser, Hayayim, I don't know if it's, I don't want to get in trouble for saying this. I remember when I grew up in the 1980s in Toronto, I went to Yeshiva's Eitz Chaim elementary school, and the Rebbeim would go to a football game on the 8th grade class trip. My year that I graduated 8th grade, we stayed in Tells for 2 days. We met Reb Chaim Stein, and we didn't go to a football game. And I remember asking my 8th grade Rebbe, I said, why we're not going to a football game? And he said to me, football games are not what they once were. And if that's true about football games, that's certainly true about casinos. To say, the word aser, could I find the siman in Shulchan Aruch?
Well, you could take the position that it's asmachta loikanya, and therefore it's a question of gezela, right?
No, but we don't ask Ashkenaz, and we don't pass it like that.
Yeah, but even the Ramah, it's not so simple, because in Hilchas Shabbos, right?
100%. There's a big shaila in that Ramah.
In Hilchas Noilid over there, in Noilid it says, I think it's Shincha Bais, Shulchan Aruch says that and the Mishnah Berurah brings that a person shouldn't make lotteries at home, like on Shabbos for fun. He shouldn't make like geirolas, he calls them. And he says why? Because of the din of Masachik Bekuvia, and the Mishnah Berurah writes Kuvia Zasa. So the Magen Avram already stole. So there does seem to be, even in the and the Ramah does not argue. So even in the Shulchan Aruch itself, it does seem that some type of it's not clear.
I would just say one nafkamina, and I don't want to be read as being muttar casinos, but by a casino hayayim, you're buying chips. It's a little bit different when you're actually purchasing an item. It's very different than when you're not putting down actual funds. You're buying something with the right to gamble.
So let me ask you a question. Would you be able to gamble if it wasn't kesef, it was shava kesef? Could I say, I'll bet you my car versus your car? It would be the same din of Masachik Bekuvia. It doesn't necessarily have to have greenbacks or something to be that.
Right, I would say there's one nafkamina. I'm not dealing with shava kesef. I'm dealing with the ability. I'm paying money. The money that I gave was for the ability, it's like a ticket in a lottery. The ability for me to play a role in this game is to purchase this ticket. But all that aside, listen, I want to be very clear. I think that going to a casino today is one of the most dangerous places for a younger man to be. Again, as a Rav, and Ramesha, you were quoting the Tshuva, and you were saying that I was echoing his words. The only tzad hashava I have with Ramesha is that I've sat in my office, as I'm sure Ramesha has, with people who have ruined their entire lives, and it all started with them walking into a casino. And it doesn't just mean...
Talk to me about that. Walk me through, without obviously names, just give me the story.
I mean, there are many stories. I mean, we're dealing with Arayis, we're dealing with Kesef. One mashal that I tell young Rabbanim, and I always ask at the young Rabbanim, what would you do, is, like every Rav, I have a discretionary account. A tzedakah fund. Baruch Hashem, I've had this chus of giving out hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout the years. You know, we're not the UJA, but we give out money. So people come with all their tzrachim. And a younger man, a ben Torah. This is someone who's a daf yomi yid. He's a successful businessman. He's not a member of my shul, so I'm not giving away secrets. In fact, very often people with these problems go to the Rav in a different community because they're less embarrassed. And he sits in my office, makes an appointment, and he says that I owe my bookie $3,500. My wife can't know that I had a relapse. If she did, she will divorce me. You know, we have 7 kids at home, and that'll be a disaster for the chinuch of my children. So could you give me the $3,500 so that I can pay my bookie, and you'll save a marriage? It's like the shayla someone once asked Rabbi Yashiv. Cain was asked to be the Cain by a pidyon ben, and he said, I knew this girl, and she was pregnant when she was in high school, and she had a baby out of town. Am I allowed to tell the husband, or should I make the bracha levatala to save the marriage? It's a very famous tshuva from Rabbi Yashiv. We're glad that he says you can't make the bracha levatala and you can't save the marriage. So the shayla is here is, what do you do? I don't think the answer is so pashut. I think this is something that Rabbanim who deal with this lose a lot of sleep over. On the one hand, you're going to give the guy $3,500. That may be destroying him and his marriage for sure. On the other hand, maybe Taka, he's sincere. Maybe now he's really learned, he's hit rock bottom. And there are cases like this, and there are cases worse than this. I mean, there are cases of a wife who calls up the Rav. Let me just think how to say this. It says, my husband went with friends to Atlantic City. They go, every 6 weeks. I let them go for a few hours. It's been 48 hours. He hasn't been home, and he's not picking up his phone. He's on a run, and who knows what's going on there. I mean, this is we cannot be naive, and I think those listening to this broadcast and are saying to themselves, I don't understand. They spoke about the halacha. There are so many heterim here, especially for Ashkenazim, leaving the stira aside. What's their problem? I think they're being very naive, that we're dealing with issues that go, Chazal understood the human condition better than anybody. And they understood that Masachet Bekuvia, the Rambam and Parashah Mishnayos write, it's not just playing craps, as people translate Masachet Bekuvia. It's about games of chance. It's been like this from time immemorial. These are places for immoral people to hang out. These are not a place for a ben Torah. And not for everybody. Some people succeed. Some people go there and they come home and they could go to Daf Yomi the next day. But you're playing mamish with fire. So there's, talking about this topic, Rabbi Lichtenstein, there's a great chasm between the halacha and the hashkafa. Halacha, so much to be saimachan, so much, as long as you can get over the asmachta issue. But hashkafically, I'm telling you, as a Rav, the tears that have been shed in my office about this issue could literally drown an individual.
Rabbi Taub, thank you very much for sharing your experience as a Rav, your halacha and your hashkafa with us, and a freilich and Chanukah to you. We have on the phone with us Reb Chaim from Borough Park, who is a person who has helped many people who suffer from gambling addictions, people who've lost their homes, maybe their marriages, children, etc. And he's been an inspiration to many. It's an honor to have you on. Welcome, Reb Chaim.
Thank you.
Reb Chaim, it's Chanukah time. A lot of people, big entry to gambling is kvitlach. I don't think it's dreidel. It's probably kvitlach. So my question to you, is gambling dangerous? Let's say a few guys want to get together. They say, let's go, putting aside the halachic ashbus for a minute, let's go to Atlantic City. Was ist schlecht? We'll be there for a few hours. We'll come back. We'll eat malava malka, etc. What is the danger of gambling?
Okay, now let's start like this. Gambling is an addiction. An addiction means there is something in your personality, there is something in the way who you are that you have an addictive personality. Doesn't mean you can have an addictive personality to everything, but your personality is addictive. Doesn't mean that you can't control yourself. It means that you have a disease of addiction. That's the scary part about gambling. Because until somebody gambles, he doesn't know if he's a gambler or not. There are plenty of people that play on Hanukkah and once a year or twice a year. They're not gamblers. So when a person is a gambler, he doesn't know it until he starts gambling. And once you start gambling and you're a gambler because your personality is a gambler, then there's just, it has destroyed families. In most cases, it destroys families.
Tell us how. Share some stories, obviously without names, but share some. You deal with this all the time, or you've spoken to many people. How does it destroy families? Why? Walk us through it.
Well, let me try to share my story first. How am I helping people? I'm helping people because I got help. Because I was a gambler. I hit my rock bottom, and every person has his place where his rock bottom is. Now, my rock bottom was a place where I still had a chance to get help and to be a normal person. But that doesn't mean I'm not a gambler anymore. That doesn't mean that 20 years later or 21 years later, since I made my last bet, that I can go gamble. I can't. I cannot gamble. And everything that I've done over the last 21 years, which has paid back every debt that I had, made good on my word when I went to people and begged them, pleaded with them, and told them that I can't pay you right now. I know I owe you $120,000. I'll get back to you in 30 days, and I'll tell you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to go get help. My rock bottom was that I was probably at the end of my line with losing everything. I had every creditor was calling me. All my lies were all coming together, the snowballing. You have to understand, when somebody is gambling, he'll do anything to get his next dollar somewhere. He'll say anything as long as he can get it next, and it doesn't matter from who. It starts with the people closest to him, and then with the people that he does business with. It doesn't end. As long as the gambler can still get some more fuel, it doesn't end.
So let me ask you another question. Let's say I was a guy, I was addicted to gambling. I was a very Halacha guy, a fine guy, I'm a happily married guy. I went one time to Atlantic City, and since then, in the last month, I've gone 25 times. What would you tell me? I said, Chaim, I went 25 times. I lost already in the last. I lost $50,000 this month, but I can't get away from gambling. What would you tell me?
So I would tell you, go get help immediately. And you're going to say, no, I don't need help. I'm good. No, I'm not me. No, I don't need to do this. I said, yeah, but you took $5,000 from your brother, and you told me it's just because you have a check coming in a few days, and you lied to him, and you ran with it to Atlantic City because you thought you were going to make money, and you lost it, and then you went to somebody else and took $10,000. And you're going to say, no, I got it under control. I got another deal coming in. I got everything under control. That's what you're going to say. Unfortunately, that's what you're going to say.
And what are you going? And what would you? How would you respond?
I would respond to it. Okay, come back to me when things are a lot worse. We'll talk then. Maybe you'll want to get the right help then.
And what would the
there's
right
nothing,
help?
There's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to convince the person that he's busted out, that he can't do this. He must want to do it on his own.
The guy who you're going to send me to, what would he say? How would he convince?
Well, you're going to sit down with the right way to do it is you go to a meeting with people who are going through it at a time. You go to a program, and you'll sit there and you'll want to listen. The first time you're not going to want to listen, but after a while, you see it just like the rest of us, and maybe you realize that gambling has you beat.
Tell us a story of somebody you know or somebody you've observed whose life was destroyed and what it was like. How? What?
I probably know more people that their lives have gotten destroyed than people who have actually gone for help and stuck it out and did the right thing for the rest of the time.
And when you say their lives were destroyed, does it mean they lost their money, they lost their jobs? What does it mean?
Et cetera, et cetera. Lost their money, lost their jobs, lost their families, got divorced.
What did it do to the kids?
Ended up in jail. Committed suicide.
You know people who actually committed suicide?
I know a person who has committed suicide. Correct.
And why? What was his situation?
I don't know why. I don't know why he committed suicide.
But what situation drove him to that?
Well, he lost his whole family. I only got to know him actually probably a month before he committed suicide. But at that point when I met him already, he had lost everything already.
And this was a Hamisher person.
It was a from person.
How does it affect the kids?
How is it? Because when a person starts taking money from every person that he knows and every person that he's associated with, things and there's no money in their house, and all the bills start piling up. And some days the electricity gets cut off. Do I need to say more? Things just become dysfunction.
And what about people who win at gambling? Does that happen, or do some people actually win and make a lot of money?
I've never, ever, ever heard of a person that goes consistently and makes money. I've never ever heard. I don't think anybody's ever heard that.
And why is that?
They didn't build those buildings in Atlantic City. People would be winning money.
Mm-hmm. Would you know, Chaim,
I know that's what the Minster Rebbe always says.
Do you know what percentage of people have to worry about a gambling addiction?
Probably more people out there that do have to worry than don't have to worry.
Really? It's as much as 50% of people, you would say?
I would say even more.
Wow.
I would say even more.
So if a person keeps losing and losing, what drives him to go back and lose again? I mean, the feeling of losing must be awful. How do you get addicted to something awful?
I'll tell you, most gamblers after a while start thinking that this is a financial thing, not a gambling issue. It's a financial issue. So you start taking money from everybody just to try to make back the money. And then they said, "I'm not a gambler. I just got to make back my money."
So you've seen suicide. Have you seen people lose their homes?
Definitely.
Have you seen people
lost their homes, lost their businesses, and many people end up in legal issues.
Because why?
Because they've taken money, whether they take money from banks or they've given bad checks or.
Or they start doing. It leads to illegal behavior. It's like feeding a heroin habit.
You have to understand. In general, compulsive gamblers are very aggressive and very sharp people. In general, they're very sharp people. They come up with ways how to get money, which many people don't. So. And the good thing about it is because when they do stop gambling, since they are shrewd and aggressive and pretty smart, I would say, it's very easy for them to become successful. It's very easy for them to turn things around. And I have to tell you, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do for somebody to go out there, like I told you earlier, and to admit that he lied and he stole, and he wants to go get help. It's not easy. But guess what? After a very short time, doing the right thing and keeping to your word, you get a lot of support from a lot of people.
Right.
You'll be able to work with, most of these people at this time when they start hitting rock bottom. They don't walk too proudly on the street.
And this is mostly.
I remember there were times where I remember there were times where I would be walking down the street or driving down the street, and I would look at just people walking, just doing their daily things, and I'm looking at this people and I say, I wish I could just be like just a normal person like those people.
Right. Are there a lot of Fruma people who have any gambling addictions?
Again, when I was people at my age, I don't know many people at my age, which I'm a little bit older. I haven't gambled already in over 21 years. When I was in my 30s, early 40s, I knew of a lot more people. It's just like, as they say, I'm not in the game anymore. I don't, but there were plenty.
And this is mostly in casinos? Is that where it occurs?
Again, I can tell you where it was 21 years ago. 21 years ago, it was mostly in casinos or sports betting, but things have changed over the years. Things have changed. There are, from what I understand, there's a lot of poker games all over in many places.
Well, Chaim, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
Hi, David. This is Yaakov Lipschitz, 718-440-6617, regarding your excellent question this week about how you can be misfollow for an ace in Harachman if you forgot our Nisim. The Shari Tshuva in Siman Kuf Tei Zayin gives two answers. One answer is that a nace of the Rabbim is okay. So a person is misfollow for a personal nace, but Harachman Yasel Lanu Nisim for Klal Yisrael is allowed. Hashem does Nisim for Klal Yisrael, and it's okay to be misfollow. And the second part is that the Harachman who Yasel Lanu Nisim is talking about the Nisim like the Nisim mentioned in our Nisim, which are the Milchama, which is a nace b'soch hateva. This is the second answer of the Shari Tshuva, that it's okay to daven for Nisim, even personal Nisim, it sounds like, that are b'soch hateva. Thank you so much, and again, it's the Shari Tshuva, Siman Kuf Pei Zayin, Testalid by the Ramavi cited.
Shalom Aleichem, David. My name is Maysharim. I wanted to offer an answer to the riddle of the week, to the Hanukkah question. I heard this from Matthew Solomon. He asked the question about why we misfollow for Nisim, and the way he explained it was that since the whole Yesod of Hanukkah is that there isn't really a chiluk between Teva and Nace. It's all a mile midah Teva. So even though it's true that we're Bederach Klal, we're not misfollow for Nisim, but on Hanukkah, that when we come to the realization that there is no chiluk between Teva and Nace, then we say Rachmani Yasel Nisim because it's the same thing. Just like we misfollow for anything, we can be misfollow for Nisim also on Hanukkah. That's also.